In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 27, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Michigan versus Illinois. Michigan heads into Champaign with the kind of spotlight that makes every possession feel louder than it should be. Road games in the Big Ten are rarely polite affairs, and this one will not be an exception. Illinois will feed off the crowd, the noise, the emotion, the sense that this is their moment to shove back at a national contender. But here's the thing, Michigan has lived in that pressure all season. They sit at 26-2 overall and 16-1 in conference play, and records like that do not happen by accident. They happen because a team handles the ugly stretches, the late whistles, the random 9-0 runs that flip a building upside down. Illinois wants to turn this into a grinder. They want rebounding battles that feel like wrestling matches and half-court possessions that drain the shot clock. That formula sounds simple, almost old school, but simple does not mean easy. It requires discipline on every trip and patience when the first good look is not the best look. Michigan, meanwhile, has already absorbed its roster setbacks. Charlie May is out for the season with a thumb injury, and Winters Grady is also sidelined, both confirmed on the official roster and injury reports. Those absences are not breaking news. They are baked into how this team operates now. Elliot Cadeau remains active and central to their rhythm, and there is no uncertainty about his availability. So when this game tightens, and it will, the question becomes who trusts their identity more. Michigan has shown they can execute late without turning frantic, without forcing hero shots, without losing structure. On the road, in a game that will swing on a handful of possessions, that steadiness matters. As our first pick for this matchup, the Michigan to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Michigan averages 89.1 per game this season, which sounds like a track meet waiting to happen. It is tempting to picture a back-and-forth showcase, the kind where both teams trade threes and nobody blinks. Let me explain why that picture can be misleading. Big conference games with real stakes often begin tight, almost cautious. The first 10 minutes feel like a chess match, not a sprint. Coaches shorten rotations, possessions stretch, and every defensive stop gets celebrated like a mini victory. Illinois has made it clear through its style that rebounding and half-court control are priorities. That approach naturally slows pace, even if the crowd begs for chaos. It is not flashy, but it is effective at shaving possessions off the game. There are also roster realities to consider. Jason Jackstys remains out for the season due to a blood clot issue, a confirmed long-term absence. Keaton Wagler dealt with a shoulder stinger recently but returned to action and is not listed as out. No surprise scratches, no mystery contributors suddenly appearing, just the rotations both teams have relied on for weeks. And late in a close game, scoring can stall. Longer possessions, strategic fouls, careful shot selection, it all adds friction. High expectations do not always equal high totals. Sometimes they produce tension instead, and tension slows everything down. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Akron versus Kent State. This matchup feels like classic Mid-American Conference basketball. Loud building, 2 schools that know each other, and a favorite that has to prove it can handle business on the road when the noise actually matters. Akron comes in looking like the steadier personality, the kind of team that is comfortable running its stuff, running clock, then getting a clean shot instead of chasing chaos for 40 minutes. Kent State leans into that chaos more, feeds off the crowd, and wants this game to feel like a long adrenaline rush where streaks decide everything instead of structure. That contrast is what really sticks. One side usually likes to live in well-drawn sets, with a defense that forces you to actually work every trip and not just trade highlight plays. The other side tends to lean on emotion, the big run, the charge that flips the building, and that is fun to watch, but it also makes their nights a little more volatile. In a rivalry setting that already has plenty of emotion built in, the group that can stay calm while everything around them is shaking usually has the cleaner possessions in the last 5 minutes. Road favorites never feel comfortable to back, especially in these midweek winter MAC games where the student section treats it like a holiday. But that is exactly where experience and a repeatable style matter. When the same sets produce the same looks and the same defensive principles show up every game, it becomes easier to trust that side not to vanish for long stretches or throw away a lead with careless trips. Kent State is always dangerous at home, no question, but the more trustworthy team in half-court execution, ball security, and late-clock decision-making tends to be the one that rewards people who are willing to hold their nose and lay a short number. As our first pick for this matchup, the Akron Zips to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, you have two offenses that can absolutely put points on the board. They both like to run when they see daylight, and casual bettors see that and think, all right, points all over the place. The thing is, these second meetings and rivalry spots can tighten up, and coaches suddenly get a lot more interested in which possession is next rather than how fun this pace looks on a highlight reel. Let me explain. When the stakes feel a little higher, rotations shrink, the best defenders stay on the floor longer, and every empty trip starts to feel heavier. Even teams that normally like to play fast will suddenly be fine taking an extra swing pass or using more clock if it means avoiding a bad turnover that sends the crowd into orbit. You can still get spurts of up and down action, sure, but between those bursts, there are long stretches where both sides are probing, calling sets, and getting into more structured actions. There is also that familiar rhythm where officials let more physical play go as the season wears on, especially in conference games where everyone has already met before. That kind of whistle can slow scoring without actually slowing the game because possessions still move, but looks at the rim are more contested, cuts get bumped, and jump shots come with tired legs attached. For a super high scoring result, you usually need both teams to be sharp at the same time, hitting shots for most of the night, not just in a few stretched out runs. Honestly, that is asking a lot in a rivalry setting that comes with nerves, noise, and coaches on both benches barking out every call. Here is the thing, the public loves rooting for buckets. It is more fun to cheer for points than for stops, but sometimes the smarter angle is to expect a game that is still entertaining, just not quite the track meet that the number suggests. With emotions high, possessions more deliberate than people expect, and defenses dialed in even from teams that usually lean offense first, the path where this one lands under a lofty scoring expectation feels very real. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Miami, Ohio versus Western Michigan. Miami walks into Kalamazoo like a headlining band squeezed onto the tiny backstage of a campus bar. Lights a little too bright and everyone waiting to see if the hype is real. This season has been one long prove-it tour for them, stacking win after win until that record looks spotless, with a perfect mark in league play on top of it. So you can imagine the confidence level when they see another conference logo across from them. Western, on the other hand, feels more like the local act that can sound great on a good night and then suddenly go off-key when the pressure shows up, especially when the opponent refuses to blink. They have already shared the floor once, and that first meeting told you plenty without needing a spreadsheet. Western actually grabbed a lead in the second half. The building had energy, and for a moment it looked like the upset story might start writing itself. Then the pattern that keeps showing up for Miami kicked back in. Possessions got more deliberate, the shot quality tilted their way, and what had been a tight contest slowly stretched into the kind of comfortable double-digit finish that looks routine on the score ticker. Honestly, that is the thing with a group like this. They rarely panic. They just keep stacking clean possessions until the other side runs out of answers. Miami plays fast enough to stress you, but not so fast that it feels out of control. Their offense leans on spacing, timing, and constant pressure on help defenders, so even defensive stops against them do not always feel like wins, more like brief pauses before the next wave. They even lost their primary floor general earlier in the season to a major knee injury and somehow turned that into a reason for everyone else to share the load, which is not normal for most teams. That kind of response usually shows up in how they manage road games, where their half-court sets are sharp, their decision-making is steady, and they seem almost eager to quiet a crowd. Western is not some walkover, to be clear. Their overall mark has more losses than wins, but they have played noticeably better at home, where the rims feel friendlier and a couple of quick threes can drag them into a run. They have gone on the road and put real numbers on the board, and there are stretches where the offense looks free and confident enough to scare any favorite. The problem is that their defense often feels like a separate, less helpful team sharing the same jerseys. Letting opponents hang around or pull away when a few stops would completely change the tone. When you zoom out a bit, the contrast becomes pretty stark. Miami's typical result looks like a team that is very comfortable winning by a healthy margin, scoring plenty while holding opponents just enough in check to keep control of the scoreboard. Western often needs to outscore their own defensive issues, and that is a tricky way to live against a side that already expects to win by multiple possessions and has the composure to back it up. Against the number, that story has repeated itself, with Miami cashing tickets far more often than not, even as expectations keep creeping higher, while Western has hovered in that frustrating middle ground where some nights they look like live dogs and other nights they barely bark. So when you blend the unbeaten momentum, the previous head-to-head, the consistent margins, and a track record of covering inflated spreads, it starts to feel like the same type of game script is more likely to show up again, only this time with everyone already aware of which side has been the reliable one against the number. As our first pick for this matchup, the Miami, Ohio Redhawks to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Miami has been living in high-scoring environments all season, games where the scoreboard seems to climb and never fully slow down, which makes sense when you pair a high-powered offense with a defense that is good enough but not suffocating. Western brings its own twist because their games often turn into shootouts, not only because they can score, but because their defense tends to leave the back door unlocked for long stretches. Put those two profiles together and it is easy to picture a track meet, the kind of night where the broadcasters start joking about running out of space on the graphic. On paper, both teams lean toward higher totals over the course of the season. Miami has been kind to anyone cheering for points, and Western has not been shy about joining the party, with plenty of games sailing over pregame expectations. Season-long numbers tell that story pretty loudly, which is why odds makers feel comfortable hanging an aggressive number and daring you to say it is too high. Here is the thing, though, and this is where timing and context matter. Late-season conference hoops do not always behave the way early-season box scores suggest. By late February, legs are heavier, scouting is sharper, and coaches know exactly what sets the other side wants to run when things get tight. Western has already seen the full Miami playbook once, and in that first meeting they actually managed to drag the game into a more controlled rhythm for a big chunk of the night before it slipped away. And those middle stretches looked more like a grind than a sprint, which tells you that both teams can get dragged into longer possessions when the sets are familiar and the counters are scouted. Recent form adds another layer. Miami's last trip on the road turned into a result that fell well short of the kind of explosive numbers people associate with them, a game where they built a cushion and then leaned into clock control instead of trying to chase highlights. You could almost feel the shift in priorities, less about putting up 100, more about making sure the final score still looks comfortable and the key players walk off the floor without extra miles on their legs. When a team that can score that easily chooses a calmer tempo late, it quietly punishes high totals. Western's offense is streaky enough to make this interesting in the wrong way for an over. They have had nights where they hang big numbers on the board and look fearless, then turn around against stronger opponents and disappear for long stretches. Those long empty trips matter a lot more when you are chasing a lofty total, because every dry spell turns into pressure on the next few possessions, and rushed shots rarely help. Their defense also invites opponents to score, but if one of those teams bends without breaking, mistakes from Western on offense become empty calories for the total. So even though the season averages and recent over trends might tempt you to assume another wild shootout, the likely game rhythm here feels a bit more controlled, shaped by familiarity, late season legs, and the possibility of one side easing off once the scoreboard feels safe. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Yale versus Cornell. Yale and Cornell meeting in Ithaca on a chilly Friday feels like classic Ivy League basketball, the kind of game where two very different personalities share the same floor for 40 minutes. One side brings a steady, methodical approach that travels well and keeps stacking results. The other leans into chaos, tempo, and a green light that would make a pickup game at the park proud. Yale rolls in with a record sitting at 21-4 overall and 9-2 in league play, which already hints at how often they do the boring things right, night after night. The Bulldogs rely on clean execution, quality shot selection, and a style that looks more like a polished game plan than a heat check, with consistent efficiency both inside and outside the arc. They rebound with purpose, they share the ball without turning it over too much, and they carry themselves like a group that expects their system to hold up even when the crowd is loud and the rims feel a little tighter. Cornell comes from the opposite direction, and honestly, that is what makes this matchup so fun. The Big Reds sit at 12-12 and 5-6 in conference play, and they thrive on pushing the pace, firing early threes, and turning games into races instead of arguments about defensive rotations. They rack up assists, they hit tough shots, and when they get rolling at home, Newman Arena can feel like a small gym with big arena energy, with runs coming in waves rather than gentle nudges. The flip side is that their aggressive style leaves cracks on the defensive end, so as quickly as the points can come for them, they can also come right back the other way. You see it in their swings, big wins mixed with double-digit losses, especially in league games where opponents have more film and less patience for mistakes. The first meeting between these two in New Haven told a pretty loud story, with Yale putting triple digits on the board and winning by a massive margin while still looking under control. That game did not feel like a fluke bounce or a miracle shooting night. It looked more like a physical, organized team calmly handling the speed and shot volume that Cornell threw at them. Yale's size, discipline, and ability to finish possessions on the glass showed up, and they looked comfortable playing at Cornell's pace without getting dragged into bad decisions or rushed, low-quality looks. Cornell now gets the rematch at home, which does matter, but their track record in conference games in that building has been volatile, with some high-flying wins sitting right next to lopsided losses where their style worked better for the opponent than for them. Yale's strong results away from home and their balanced profile on both ends help shape a picture where the more stable, structured team is better positioned to handle the swings that Cornell's style creates over the course of a full game. As our first pick for this matchup, the Yale Bulldogs to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Yale plays with enough pace and offensive efficiency to put up numbers in the low 80s on an average night, but they usually keep opponents in the low 70s thanks to organized defense and solid rebounding. Their games feel energetic without turning into track meets every single time, more like controlled tempo than pure chaos. Cornell, on the other hand, lives much closer to the edge, piling up points in the high 80s while giving back plenty on the defensive end, which turns most of their contests into open gym-style showdowns. They get those numbers by pushing in transition, letting threes fly, and trusting that their rhythm will hold over 40 minutes, which can be thrilling when shots are falling and a little stressful when they are not. The first matchup between these teams landed at a big combined total, but that score was heavily tilted by one side carrying most of the load while the other struggled to keep up. That kind of game can inflate how we remember the tempo, because a blowout with one team scoring easily often slows down late, even as the scoreboard feels wild when you glance at it. Looking at Cornell's recent conference stretch, you see a pattern where the scores are still high, but not quite as explosive as the full season averages suggest, with several games landing in the 150s or even lower when one side cools off or the defense tightens. Late season familiarity, extra scouting, and tired legs all start to matter, and that can quietly shave a few possessions or a few made shots off what you might expect if you only focus on early season fireworks. Yale's defensive habits fit into that story nicely. They contest shots with discipline, they clean the glass so there are fewer easy second chances, and they do not constantly send opponents to the line for cheap points. All of that adds up in a subtle way, especially against a high-tempo team that wants every miss to become fuel for the next fast break. Cornell will still push, and they will still create stretches where the game feels like a blur. But there is a real chance that Yale's structure nudges more possessions into half-court sets and squeezes just a bit of air out of the wildest scoring scenarios. In a matchup where both offenses have the tools to score but one defense is better at calming things down, the most reasonable expectation is a game that is entertaining and brisk but lands a touch below the most explosive version of this script. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Siena versus Fairfield. Imagine walking into Mahoney Arena on a Friday night and feeling the place pull you toward one story while the numbers quietly tell you something else. The banners hang, the student section buzzes, and that Fairfield home mark of 11-3 feels like a big neon sign saying home favorite. The price tag follows that vibe, giving the Stags a small cushion, and on the surface it all makes sense. Loud gym, familiar rims, short trip for the home crowd. Underneath all that noise sits a Siena team that has dragged itself from a 4-28 rock bottom not long ago to a 19-10 surge with a real shot at its first 20-win season since the 2019-20 campaign. That is a massive swing in identity, from punchline to problem, and they are sitting second in the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, with a first-round bye already locked in, which is not exactly how a typical soft underdog usually looks. It feels odd to call them the underdog at all, and honestly, that weird mix of perception and reality is where a lot of the value lives. Fairfield has already seen exactly what this version of Siena looks like up close. The Saints walked into Fairfield's gym earlier and left with an 85-77 win, and that was the night where they hung a season-high 85 points and shot a wild 67.4% from the field. That kind of shooting night does not show up by accident. It usually means the matchups and the spacing felt comfortable, and both teams know it. Fairfield got the full picture of what happens if Siena gets into rhythm, and Siena got the confidence boost of proving it in that building already. The stylistic clash adds another little twist. Fairfield wants to play free, fun, and fast, and they have the resume of those wide-open nights, somewhere around 76 points per game and plenty of highlight stretches that show up on the scoreboard more than the tape. Siena lives a bit closer to the edge, scoring about 71 per night but keeping opponents down near 66.4. And that lower number matters when you are trying to steal road games where every stop feels like a mini-win. Their coach has not exactly been shy about demanding more on that side either. He has complained even after wins, like that 82-79 result over Niagara, where he was annoyed about how many clean threes they gave up. When the guy running the show is cranky about defense in February, while his team is chasing a milestone 20th win and playing for Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference seeding, you are usually looking at a group that leans into discipline instead of panic once the crowd hits full volume. So in a game where the home team carries the reputation and the better home record, but the visitor brings the stronger conference standing, the better defensive profile, and the head-to-head win already sitting in its pocket, rolling with the points on the roadside feels less like chasing a long shot and more like quietly siding with the team that has been acting like a contender for weeks. As our first pick for this matchup, the Siena Saints to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The projected scoring story here is almost like a sequel pitch to that first meeting. Same cast, same gym, and supposedly the same kind of fireworks show. That first game did race into the 80s, so it is easy to expect a repeat, and you can see why people get pulled in by the memory of that box score. Fairfield has played its part in that reputation with some absurd explosion nights, hanging 121 on CCNY, dropping 92 on Sacred Heart, and recently throwing 85 at Quinnipiac, so the label of fun Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference team has not come out of nowhere. Once you zoom in on the conference grind and look at the last several weeks, though, the movie looks very different. Siena's recent scores sound like something a defensive-minded coach would save as a playlist on Synergy. 72-63 against St. Peter's, 67-63 at Marist, 65-70 at St. Peter's, 62-74 against Quinnipiac. Most of those land in that low 130s neighborhood, sometimes creeping toward the high 130s, and only really getting dragged higher when you throw overtime into the mix, like the 79-72 extra time loss to Merrimack. Fairfield's recent Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference stretch tells a similar story once you scrape off the brightest scoring outliers. You see games like 63-60 against Marist, 65-72 against Quinnipiac, 71-70 against Iona, matchups that live in the 125-140 range far more often than they lean into the 150s. For a team with an offense averaging around 76, that tilt toward lower combined numbers says a lot about how conference scouting and game plans slow things down. That first 85-77 meeting sits in the background the whole time, but the key details there is just how scorching Siena was from the field, well above 60%, which almost begs the basketball gods to pull things back to earth. Both staffs have had a full look at that tape by now. Every ball screen, every cut, every closeout, and rematches like this usually turn into more of a chess match than a track meet. Context matters too. Late February, seeding on the line, one side coached by someone who has been publicly hammering defense, and a slightly shortened Siena rotation because of that season-ending knee injury in the front court all combined to push games toward tighter possessions rather than wild runs. Fairfield is staring at a team that already lit up its defense once, and when that happens, coaches tend to trade some pace for control, more set actions, more deliberate half-court trips, fewer early clock gambles that might fuel the other side again. Those are all small adjustments, but stacked together they chip away at scoring chances. If you mash together the season averages, you get something right around the mid-140s, about 71.1 for Siena, and 76.0 for Fairfield on offense, with 66.4 and 72.9 allowed. On paper, that rough math nudges you toward a big number, but it is stretched across the entire season. Every non-conference game, every blowout, every outlier shooting night baked in. This specific rematch sits in a different lane, with both teams better prepared, defensive emphasis turned up, and a natural pull toward a slower rhythm where it feels more like a race to 70 than a rerun of the original 85-77 show. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.